So now that we've seen all of the toolbars and customized our settings, it's time to start making music. One of the main windows you will use is the channel window. This is where you will insert instruments and samples, as well as manage and manipulate them. Each button icon represents either a sample, a soft synth, an audio clip, or an automation clip. As mentioned before, in FL Studio, you create patterns and then string these patterns together in the playlist to form a song. To insert a new channel, you can right-click on any of the existing channel buttons, in this case the sampler, and then move down to Insert. This will pull up a list of all available instruments that you can insert. Move through the list and left-click to insert. The interface for the particular instrument will appear on the screen and a new channel button will appear in the channel window. You can also add new instruments that you have installed by going back to the available instruments list and selecting More from the top. This will open up a list of available generators that may not be in your list. You can left-click on the little box beside the name of the generator that you want to appear in the available list. Conversely, you can uncheck the boxes to remove that item from the available list. If you have just installed a new plugin, you may need to refresh the list in order for it to appear. I would recommend doing a fast scan. This scans your system for any new plugins and will automatically add them to the list in red. You can then select them and close this window. When you reopen the Insert dialog, any changes that you made should be reflected. One thing to watch out for is sometimes effects plugins will also appear in the installed plugins list, so not everything in that list is necessarily a generator or an instrument. Pay attention to the names and know what you have installed. If you try to insert an effect into the channel window, you will be told that the plugin seems to be an effect and cannot be used. A blank channel will be inserted called Fruity Wrapper. This can then just be deleted. The way to delete a channel is to right-click on the channel that you want to delete and select Delete. Keep in mind, and as the dialog box will warn you, there is no undo on deleting channels. Once it's gone, it's gone. If you're not sure if you want to delete it, save your project first, then delete it. This way, if you want to bring it back, you can open up your saved file. You can also choose to replace a channel, which is very helpful if you already have some notes drawn out where you want them, but you think a different instrument would sound better. All you have to do is choose Replace and then select what you want to replace the channel with, and all of your data will be preserved only with the new channel in its place. You can also clone a channel, which is useful for adding multiple channels with the same settings. When you clone, though, your data will not transfer with it, so what you need to do is copy and paste. To do this, right-click on the channel with the data in it, and select Edit and then Copy, and then right-click on the channel that you want to paste to and select Edit and then Paste. We also have options for cutting the sample, which means if you have a sample that's playing at 140 beats per minute and it goes for 2 bars, but our channel window is only going for 1 bar, you can select Cut itself and it will only play the amount of steps you have on the screen. Otherwise, the sample will play all the way through and will begin to overlap itself. This is also where you can rename a channel and choose its color. Also, when working with the step sequencer, you can choose the default settings to fill in every 2, 4, or 8 steps, as well as send the data to the piano roll, which is the second half of the music making portion of FL Studio. So now that we've seen how to insert, delete, and clone channels, we'll see how to use them. When you begin a project, each channel will appear as a step sequencer. Each of these little button icons represents a step. You can see that in this case, because our project is in 4/4 time, there are 4 gray and 4 red steps, which repeat 4 times. To add data to a step, simply left-click it. You will know which steps contain data as they will become highlighted. In this example, I'm going to drag a drum sound from the browser into a sampler channel and then draw out some steps. Now when I press play, you will be able to see and hear how this creates sound. Now, the step sequencer can also be used by generators, but you have to use the graph and keyboard editors, which we'll look at in a minute, to manipulate the data. The step sequencer plays each step as if it were the middle C, or C5, on a keyboard. Therefore, any sound coming from the step sequencer from a generator will simply be the C key. Here, you'll see how this doesn't offer us much in the way of creative control. So, to change notes and velocity, we have the graph and keyboard editors. These can be found in the two boxes on the top right-hand corner of the channel window. To use them, first choose which channel you want to edit by left-clicking it, and then left-click on the keyboard editor and you will see a drop-down box that contains a virtual keyboard for each step. You can then left-click to set the note for the corresponding step. We also have a slide function for each note. You can set this by left-clicking it right here. This will cause the preceding note to slide into the note with the slide activated. You can remove this by right-clicking the slide icon. We can also adjust the volume and other parameters of each step by opening the graph window. Here, we see the velocity settings. You can left-click and drag up or down to adjust the velocity for each step. We also have other parameters such as pan, velocity release, modulation X, which is a cutoff filter, and modulation Y, which is resonance, as well as pitch and shift, which shifts the note to the next step at 100%. Now, the step sequencer is a great tool to use, but I find that I mainly use it for samples or drums, maybe effects sometimes. As you'll see in the piano roll tutorial, the step sequencer is much easier for laying down simple one-note sounds or loops. The piano roll will be your main composing tool, and it will offer you much more in the way of flexibility and usability. We'll be taking a look at using the sampler and a few other plugins as we move along. You can also drag samples and presets to the channel window from the browser, or by minimizing the program and dragging from another place on your computer. This makes for a quick and convenient way to get sounds and virtual instruments into your project. In most cases, you can drag presets to the channel window and they will automatically open, or you can replace virtual instruments using the same method. You'll also notice that we have volume and panning controls to the left of each channel. These controls can be used by left-clicking and dragging. You can also gain finer control of the knobs and sliders in FL Studio by holding Control while left-clicking and dragging to have slower movements and thus be able to get a more precise setting. You can think of the channel controls like a preamp. These controls are the input volume and panning. What I mean by that is when you insert a channel, you'll want to assign it to a mixer track. Once you've assigned it to a mixer track, the mixer will function as your volume and panning. But the channel volume and panning knobs control the input to the mixer. So you can set the volume or panning of a channel, assign it to a mixer track, and then any effects you place on the channel will work based on the volume you set in the channel volume. Sometimes it's necessary to pan channels hard left or hard right, like in the case of routing for the vocoder, because the vocoder routing will only read the left channel. We'll talk more about this in the routing tutorial, but again, think of the channel volume and panning as the preamp going into the mixer. You can use these controls to mix your project if you don't want to go through the mixer, but you'll be missing out on a lot of flexibility if you do this. We'll take a closer look at the mixer in a later video. Notice here you can also solo channels. This is useful when you have multiple channels sent to a single mixer track and you want to take some out in certain parts of a song. You can solo or mute tracks using this solo switch without soloing or muting everything on the mixer track. You can solo and mute channels by left-clicking on the little green light, or you can right-click and choose solo. If you have soloed a channel and you don't want to go back through and left-click all of the remaining channels to get them to play again, you can use the right-click method and choose solo to unmute all of the rest of the channels. We'll talk about soloing and muting in the mixer tutorial as well. You'll also notice that when you click on a channel button, the channel settings window will appear. This window gives us extra parameters for use for that channel. These parameters may change with different plugins. We'll take a closer look at this in the sampler tutorial. Now quickly, I want to go over the other settings that we have in the channel window. First, here in the top left-hand corner, we have the option to change the number of steps. This can work together with the time signature that we have our project set to and will adjust accordingly. We also have an option for repeat step sequencer. This is a handy function to use when combining the piano roll and step sequencer. If we have a pattern that has 8 bars of a synth in the piano roll and only 4 bars of a kick drum in the step sequencer, we'll end up with only half of the pattern playing the kick drum. So when we turn this option on, we'll see that the step sequencer repeats itself at the end of each bar. We also have a setting for swing, which is represented by this slider. You can slide this control from left to right to get a more swing feel. You can experiment with it to get exactly the swing effect you want. Now this only affects the step sequencer though, and it affects the entire project, so if you have a project that is using the piano roll as well, know that this effect will not affect the data in the piano roll and will only affect the step sequencer data. The last two things to mention here are in regards to selecting channels. When you're dealing with an action that requires you to select a channel or multiple channels, what that means is to select the little green light beside the channel button. You can do this by left-clicking the green light icon. When this is lit up, that channel is selected. If you need to select multiple channels, you can right-click the channels you want to select. To deselect, you can right-click again. Finally, at the bottom of the channel window, we have a filter. This drop-down filter list lets you select between different groups of channels. Unsorted includes any channels that you have not assigned to a group or that are not audio or automation clips. You can group channels together by selecting which channels you want to group and selecting Group Selected. You can then enter a name and that group will be added to the list. You can add channels to that group by either following the same path and entering in the exact name of the group you want to add to, or by simply adding a channel with that particular group open. To remove a channel from a group, you can select the channel you want removed and again go to Tools and name the group Unsorted. This moves the selected channels back to the unsorted category. You can also use this method to move channels to different groups. So in this tutorial, we've taken a quick look at the channel window and the step sequencer and seen the basics of music creation. Before we get to the piano roll, I want to take a look at the sampler. We'll do this because we're learning about the step sequencer, and I want you to be able to see the full potential of the step sequencer before we move on. And the sampler is an integral part of using the step sequencer. As always, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.